Ego is the Enemy, by Ryan Holiday. Introduction. There's a story about a young man, a phenomenal athlete in the 1940s, whose talent was matched only by his temper. His name was Jackie Robinson. He was proud, and he had every reason to be. In a world that constantly told him he was less than, his pride was his armor. He ran with a gang, he challenged anyone who disrespected him, and he even ended his military career after refusing to be sent to the back of a bus. He was a fighter. It was in his blood. So imagine him, sitting across from a man named Branch Rickey, the manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Rickey wanted to do the impossible: integrate Major League Baseball. He had scouted dozens of players, but he saw something in Jackie. The meeting wasn't about contracts or batting averages. Rickey looked this fiery young man in the eye and asked him if he had the guts to do it. But the guts he was looking for weren't what you'd think. Rickey started acting out scenes. He played the part of a racist hotel clerk, a hateful opponent, a screaming fan. He wanted to know if Jackie could withstand the slurs, the cheap shots, the spikes aimed at his ankles, the fastballs aimed at his head, all without fighting back. "I'm looking for a ball player," Rickey said, "with the guts not to fight back." What does it take to do that? To swallow your pride? To restrain your most basic human instinct for a cause bigger than yourself? It takes a profound understanding of a hidden enemy, one that lives inside every single one of us. That enemy is the subject of a remarkable book by Ryan Holiday, titled Ego is the Enemy. This isn't just another book on a shelf. It's a modern classic, a guide that has found its way into the hands of champions, leaders, artists, and anyone serious about reaching their potential. It's a book born from ancient wisdom but written for the battles we fight today, not on a baseball diamond, but within our own minds. By the end of our time together, you will understand the single greatest obstacle that stands between you and a life of meaning and accomplishment. It's not your circumstances. It's not other people. It's that voice inside your head that whispers you're special, that you're better, that you're entitled. And more importantly, you will walk away with the timeless strategies to manage that voice, so that you can become humble in your aspirations, gracious in your success, and resilient in your failures. This is the secret to building a life that doesn't just look good, but feels good, a life of purpose that lasts. Book summary. So where does our journey begin? It begins where all great journeys do, with aspiration. You have a dream, a goal. You want to make your mark on the world. This is a beautiful, powerful thing. But right here, at the very starting line, our enemy is already lacing up its shoes. The author shows us that there are two types of people who rise to greatness. The first believes in themselves from the start, a blinding confidence that feels like destiny. The second type is different. Their belief in themselves is a slow growth, something built piece by piece on actual achievement. Their own success is a constant, wonderful surprise. This was the path of a man named William Tecumseh Sherman. Today, we might not remember him as well as other generals, but Sherman was one of the great strategic minds of the American Civil War. He wasn't born a genius, full of fire and fury. His rise was slow, methodical. He learned the land by traversing it on horseback for years. When the war began and President Lincoln offered him a high command, Sherman made a strange request. He would accept the promotion, but only if Lincoln promised he would not have to take on superior command. Think about that. An ambitious person, turning down power because he didn't yet feel ready for it. He had an honest understanding of his own abilities. He chose to be a student of reality, not a slave to his own ambition. This humility allowed him to support other generals, like Ulysses S. Grant, instead of competing with them. He waived his own rank to help Grant win one of the Union's first major victories. He chose the team's success over his own glory. His famous march to the sea wasn't a stroke of impulsive genius. It was built on years of quiet study of the land he was now moving through. He was effective because he was grounded. This brings us to one of the most important questions you will ever face in your life, a question posed by a brilliant but little-known fighter pilot and strategist named John Boyd. He would take promising young officers aside and present them with a choice. One day, he'd say, "You will come to a fork in the road. If you go one way, you can be somebody. You'll make compromises, you'll get the promotions, you'll be a member of the club. Or," he would pause, "you can go the other way, and you can do something. Something for your country, for your cause, for yourself. You might not get the good assignments. You might not be a favorite of your superiors. But you will make a difference." To be, or to do? Ego always chooses to be. It wants the title, the recognition, the appearance of success. It's the person who calls themselves an entrepreneur before they've ever built a business. It's the person who loves the idea of being a writer more than the actual, painful work of writing. Doing, on the other hand, is about the work itself. It's quiet. It's focused. It's about the thing you are trying to create, not the credit you hope to receive. And this is where ego first trips us up. It makes us talk when we should be working. The writer Upton Sinclair once ran for governor of California. Before the election, he published a book called I, Governor of California, and How I Ended Poverty. He wrote, in the past tense, about all the wonderful things he had accomplished in the office he hadn't yet won. The book was a bestseller. The campaign? A catastrophic failure. In his imagination, he had already played the part. The fire to actually do the work had flickered out. We see this everywhere today. We post our grand plans on social media, we tell everyone what we're going to do. It feels good. It feels like progress. But as the author points out, talking and doing fight for the same resources. Every bit of energy you spend on hyping yourself up is energy you're not spending on the work. Silence is a source of strength. The great football player Bo Jackson had 2 goals in college: win the Heisman Trophy and be the first pick in the NFL draft. Do you know who he told? Nobody. He put his head down and did the work. Let the work speak for itself. But how do you do the work if you don't know how? You become a student. A true, eternal student. This is one of the most powerful antidotes to ego. Consider the story of Kirk Hammett. In the early 80s, he gets the phone call every guitarist dreams of. He's been invited to join a small, underground band called Metallica. He's made it. He's a professional rock star. What's the first thing he does? He finds a guitar teacher. Despite being good enough to join a band that would go on to sell over 100 million albums, Kirk knew he wasn't as good as he could be. He sought out a teacher, Joe Satriani, who was known for being harsh and demanding. Satriani said that what separated Kirk from other talented players was his willingness to be coached, to be told he was wrong, to drill the fundamentals over and over. He had no room for ego, he was too busy learning. The martial arts pioneer Frank Shamrock has a system for this. He says every great fighter needs 3 things: someone better they can learn from, someone lesser they can teach, and someone equal they can challenge themselves against. This creates a constant, 360-degree feedback loop. It purges the ego that tells you you're the best, the fear that tells you you're not good enough, and the laziness that tells you you can just coast. You must always stay a student. Now, our culture tells us something different. It tells us to find our passion. Follow your passion is the mantra of our time. But Ryan Holiday offers a radical, crucial piece of advice: don't be passionate. Be purposeful. What's the difference? Passion is hot, fast, and emotional. It's the unbridled enthusiasm that makes us leap before we look. Think of the entrepreneurs who were so passionate about their world-changing idea that they never stopped to ask if anyone would actually buy it. Passion is what fueled the disastrous invasion of Iraq. It's what sent Christopher McCandless into the wild unprepared, to his death. Passion is often ego in disguise. It's about our feelings, our zeal. Purpose, on the other hand, is colder, calmer, more rational. It's not about what you feel, it's about what you were put here to do. It's about something bigger than yourself. Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the most influential women in history, was a woman of deep purpose. When a visitor once complimented her passionate interest in a cause, she gently corrected them. She supported the cause, yes, but she said, "I hardly think the word passionate applies to me." She was driven by reason, by duty, by a clear sense of direction. The legendary basketball coach John Wooden was famous for his dispassionate approach. He wasn't about fiery speeches, he was about systems, fundamentals, and control. Passion, he believed, was a burden. Purpose is like passion with boundaries. It's the long-term, steady fire that keeps you going when the initial excitement wears off. Passion is for amateurs. Purpose is for professionals. So you're purposeful, you're a student, you're quiet and focused on the work. How do you navigate the world of people, especially those more powerful than you? You follow what the author calls the canvas strategy. In ancient Rome, a young artist or writer would often attach themselves to a wealthy patron. One of their roles was to be an anti-ambulo, literally, one who clears the path. They would walk ahead of their patron, making way for them, making their life easier. It sounds demeaning, doesn't it? The angry, unappreciated genius forced to serve lesser people. That's how ego sees it. But what if you reframed it? What if, instead of seeing it as kissing up, you saw it as finding canvases for other people to paint on? Your job, when you're starting out, is to make other people look good. Not because you're a sycophant, but because it's the most effective way to learn and to create a path for yourself. You are not as good or as important as you think you are. You have an attitude that needs adjusting. Most of what you learned in school is wrong or outdated. The quickest way to fix these things is to attach yourself to someone successful and subsume your ego into their mission. Clear the path for them, and you will learn how the path is cleared. Bill Belichick, the legendary Patriots coach, got his start by mastering the one job other coaches hated: analyzing film. He volunteered to do it for free. He disappeared into a room and came out with brilliant insights, and he let the senior coaches take all the credit. He was playing the long game. He was learning. He was making himself indispensable. The person who clears the path, the author reminds us, ultimately controls its direction. And as you clear that path, you will face injustice. You will be slighted. You will be disrespected. And your ego will scream for you to fight back. This is where you must learn to restrain yourself. This brings us back to Jackie Robinson. For the first few years of his career, he endured a level of abuse that is almost impossible for us to comprehend today. Players tried to injure him. Fans screamed the most vile things. His own teammates petitioned to have him thrown off the team. And through it all, he held his tongue. He absorbed the hate, the injustice, the unfairness, because he had made a promise to Branch Rickey, and because he understood the mission was bigger than his own feelings. He shouldn't have had to do it. But he did. And in doing so, he changed the world. Our own struggles will pale in comparison, but the principle is the same. When you are just starting out, you will have to put up with a certain amount of nonsense. Your ego will tell you that you're better than this, that you deserve more. And maybe you do. But what you need more than validation is to get where you're going. Restraint is not weakness. It is a sign of immense strength and strategic intelligence. It's knowing which battles to fight, and which to walk away from so you can win the war. This entire stage of aspiration, the climb, is a battle against your own mind. It's about getting out of your own head. So many of us live our lives like we're the main character in a movie that only we are watching. We're constantly narrating our own story, congratulating ourselves for victories not yet won, or wallowing in imaginary slights. The Civil War general George McClellan was a master of this. He was a genius at preparing an army for battle, but he could never lead one into the fight. He was so in love with his own story, so convinced of imaginary threats and intrigues, that he was paralyzed by his own thoughts. We have to break free from this internal monologue. We have to connect with the reality in front of us. There is no one to perform for. There is just work to be done. And as you do that work, you have to be vigilant against the danger of early pride. When a young Benjamin Franklin, puffed up with a little bit of early success, was walking with the respected minister Cotton Mather, he was so busy posturing that he didn't hear Mather's warning. "Stoop! Stoop!" Mather cried out, but it was too late. Franklin walked straight into a low-hanging beam. Mather's advice was perfect. "Stoop, young man, stoop, as you go through this world, and you'll miss many hard thumps." Pride takes a small accomplishment and makes it feel like a masterpiece. It convinces us we're a genius, when we've just had a bit of luck. It blunts the very tool we need to succeed, our mind. It stops us from learning, from adapting, from building relationships. As John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men in history, used to say to himself every night, "Because you have got a start, you think you are quite a merchant, look out or you will lose your head, go steady." He knew that pride was the first step toward a fall. We must kill it before it kills our ambitions. And so, you do it. You put in the hours. You are humble, purposeful, and disciplined. And it works. You achieve success. You reach the summit. This is where the air gets thin. This is where the enemy attacks with a terrifying new strength. Meet Howard Hughes. A genius inventor, a brave pilot, a visionary filmmaker, and one of the richest men of his time. He inherited $1 million tool company as a teenager, and, with a stroke of incredible foresight, bought out his relatives to gain full control. It was a business that would generate billions over the next century. And with that security, he set out to build one of the most wasteful, dishonest, and embarrassing business records in history. Why? Because his success was a fortress that protected his ego from reality. He was a man who evaporated hundreds of millions of dollars, not by accident, but almost entirely because of his own delusional actions. His most famous movie, Hell's Angels, lost a fortune. He built the largest plane in the world, the Spruce Goose, and flew it once, for a single mile, before parking it in an air-conditioned hangar for decades at a cost of $1 million a year. He bought the RKO movie studio and ran it into the ground. The story of his life is a descent into a private hell of paranoia, addiction, and obsession. He ended his days as a recluse, a prisoner in his own penthouse, a man who had everything and enjoyed nothing. Howard Hughes is the flesh and blood metaphor for what happens when success meets an unchecked ego. It kills everything it touches. Success is intoxicating. And to sustain it, the author tells us, requires sobriety. This is the great paradox. The very things that got you to the top, the hunger, the humility, the willingness to learn, are the first things to go when ego takes over. This is why you must, now more than ever, always stay a student. Think of Genghis Khan. We have this image of him as a mindless barbarian. The reality is that he was one of the greatest military minds in history precisely because he was a perpetual learner. He wasn't born a genius, he built his genius. His Mongol horde was as ruthless about absorbing the best ideas from the cultures they conquered as they were about conquest itself. From Turkic tribes, they learned the decimal system to organize their armies. From the Chinese, they learned siege warfare to take down walled cities. His empire became a great crossroads of cultures and ideas, spreading everything from Chinese noodles to the West to Persian carpets to the East. He was the greatest conqueror in history because he was the most open to learning. As we succeed, our island of knowledge grows, but so does the shore of our ignorance. We encounter new problems, new challenges. The ego tells us we should already have the answers. Humility allows us to admit we don't, and to go find them. As the jazz legend Wynton Marsalis said, you can tell when someone is truly humble because they consistently observe and listen. And because they listen, they improve. They don't stand in their own way. Success also tempts us to do something very dangerous, to tell ourselves a story. We look back at our messy, chaotic, luck-filled path to the top and we craft a neat narrative. I knew it all along, we say. This was my grand plan. This is a lie. And it's a dangerous one. When Bill Walsh took over the San Francisco 49ers, they were the worst team in football. 3 years later, they were Super Bowl champions. The fastest turnaround in NFL history. Was it his grand plan? When people asked him, his answer was always no. To have such a plan would have been delusional. Instead of a grand vision, Walsh implemented what he called his standard of performance. It was about 1,000 tiny details. Players couldn't sit down on the practice field. Coaches had to wear a tie. The locker room had to be spotless. Passing routes were graded down to the inch. He believed that if you took care of the details, the score would take care of itself. The winning would happen, but he was humble enough to know he couldn't predict when. When we start believing our own hype, our own story, we stop focusing on the small things that made us successful in the first place. The 49ers proved this. After their first Super Bowl, they got cocky. They believed their own press clippings. They promptly had 2 losing seasons. Only when they returned to the discipline of the standard of performance did they become a dynasty. There is no grand narrative. There is only the work. Keep your identity small. Make it about the principles, not the glorious vision. Napoleon had to destiny engraved on his wedding ring. He believed he was a man of destiny. And that belief is what drove him to overreach, again and again, until his real destiny was exile and defeat. A great destiny, as the philosopher Seneca said, is a great slavery. As you navigate success, you'll find yourself surrounded by other successful people. And this is where ego plays another trick. It makes you want what they have. You start to lose sight of your own priorities. After the Civil War, both Grant and Sherman were national heroes. They could have anything they wanted. Sherman, as we know, abhorred politics and lived a quiet, contented life. Grant, however, couldn't help himself. He'd won the war. Now he wanted to be president. He presided over a corrupt and ineffective administration. After leaving office, he tried to become a millionaire, like the men who looked up to him. He invested his entire fortune with a con man and was publicly bankrupted. He spent his final days, dying of throat cancer, racing to finish his memoirs so his family would have something to live on. He had accomplished so much, but it was never enough. He couldn't decide what was important to him. He was running someone else's race. The author introduces the Greek word euthymia. It is the sense of our own path, and how to stay on it without getting distracted by all the others. It's not about beating the other guy. It's about being what you are, and being as good as possible at it. If you don't know how much you need, the author warns, the default becomes more. You have to know what you want, and what you're willing to trade for it. Because you can't have it all. Ego thinks it can. reality knows it can't. And as you hold on to your success, you will feel the seductive pull of entitlement, control, and paranoia. The Emperor Xerxes, when a storm destroyed the bridges he was building, literally had the sea whipped 300 times and branded with hot irons. That's what power can do to the mind. It makes you believe you can command reality itself. You start to think, this is mine. I've earned it. That's entitlement. You start to think, it must all be done my way. That's control. You start to think, I can't trust anyone. They're all out to get me. That's paranoia. These are the diseases of success. The cure is to manage yourself. Look at Dwight D. Eisenhower. When he became president, his first priority was not to issue grand orders, but to create a system. He knew that his job was to focus on the most important things, and to trust his staff to do the rest. He delegated. He organized. He ran a tight ship, which is what gave him the freedom to think about the big picture. Compare that to John DeLorean. He was a brilliant car designer who left GM to start his own futuristic car company. He was convinced that GM's discipline and order had held him back. So he created a company with no rules, no accountability. The result was chaos. The DeLorean car was a disaster, and the company collapsed in a storm of corruption and fraud. DeLorean was a genius, but as the author reminds us, that's rarely enough. You have to be able to manage yourself, and your ego. This means you must constantly fight what Coach Pat Riley calls the disease of me. When a team first starts winning, it's a beautiful thing. They're innocent. They play for each other. But after the championships, after the media attention, egos emerge. Players start counting their stats, thinking about their own brand. The bonds fray. The team collapses from within. The antidote is a man like General George Marshall. He was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army during all of World War II. While other generals postured and fought for their place in history, Marshall was a ghost. He was so selfless that it baffled those around him. The command of the D-Day invasion, the most glorious command in the war, was his for the asking. He'd trained his whole life for it. But he told President Roosevelt, "The decision is yours, Mr. President. My wishes have nothing to do with the matter." The glory went to Eisenhower. Marshall stayed in Washington and did the thankless, critical work of running the war. He played for the name on the front of the jersey, and in doing so, history has remembered the name on the back. To keep this perspective, you have to meditate on the immensity of the world. The explorer John Muir, standing in Glacier Bay, Alaska, was struck by a powerful feeling he called sympathia, a connectedness with the cosmos. He saw the tides, the forests, the insects, the animals, all part of a single beautiful system. In those moments, ego is impossible. You realize you are a tiny but essential part of something much, much larger. We must actively seek out these moments. Walk on an ancient battlefield. Stare at the stars. Let the universe remind you of your true size. This perspective cultivates what is perhaps the most essential quality of a lasting leader: sobriety. Not just in the literal sense, but in the sense of being clear-headed, calm, and balanced. The current Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, is the embodiment of this. She is plain, modest, and quiet. She gives no fiery speeches. She is the tortoise in a world of hares. And this is precisely what has made her one of the most powerful and effective leaders in the world. When Vladimir Putin tried to intimidate her by letting his large dog into a meeting, she didn't flinch. She remained calm, and he was the one who ended up looking foolish and insecure. She knows that you can't solve complex problems with charisma or bluster. You solve them with reason, with patience, with sobriety. But what happens when, despite all your best efforts, you fail? When the world knocks you off the summit and sends you tumbling to the bottom, this is the third and final stage of our journey. And here, ego is not just an obstacle. It is fatal. The journey of Katharine Graham is a testament to this. She was born into a life of incredible privilege. Her father owned the Washington Post. She married a brilliant, charismatic man who took it over. Her life seemed set. Then, it all fell apart. Her husband suffered a severe mental breakdown and, tragically, took his own life. At 46, with no work experience, Katharine Graham found herself in charge of a massive corporation. She was unprepared and terrified. And her trial was just beginning. She had to fight a patronizing board, publish the Pentagon Papers against the advice of her lawyers, and withstand the full wrath of the Nixon White House during Watergate. The Attorney General of the United States threatened her personally. The paper's printers went on a vicious strike, wearing shirts that said, "Phil shot the wrong Graham." Her competitors refused to help her. Her company's stock price plummeted. At any point, she could have sold the paper and walked away. Her ego could have told her, "This isn't fair. I don't deserve this." She could have lashed out, made excuses, or given up. But she didn't. She found, as the writer Thomas Paine once said of George Washington, a cabinet of fortitude she never knew she had. She was guided not by her feelings, but by her purpose, to protect her family's legacy and to serve the public good. And in the end, she didn't just survive. She prevailed. The Post won a Pulitzer Prize for Watergate, and she became one of the greatest CEOs of her generation. Failure is where ego shows its true colors. It either wallows in self-pity, or it lashes out in rage. It adds self-injury to every injury. The humble and strong person, however, has a different response. They see failure not as a judgment on their character, but as a situation to be dealt with. This is where you face a choice. A choice Robert Greene calls alive time or dead time. Dead time is when we are passive and waiting. It's when we wallow, we blame, we despair. Alive time is when we are learning, acting, and using every second. When Malcolm Little, a young criminal known as Detroit Red, was sentenced to 10 years in prison, he was at rock bottom. He could have spent that time becoming a better criminal. That would have been dead time. Instead, he chose alive time. He went to the prison library and copied the entire dictionary, word by word, longhand. He read history, philosophy, sociology. Prison became his college. He said he had never been so truly free in his life. The man who walked out of that prison was not Detroit Red. He was Malcolm X. He had used his failure as the foundation for his greatness. Whatever you're going through, it is not your life. It is a moment in your life. Will you use it as alive time or dead time? In these moments, you must learn to detach from the outcome. The effort has to be enough. Belisarius was one of the greatest generals in Roman history. He saved Western civilization multiple times. His thanks? The paranoid emperor he served repeatedly stripped him of his command, his wealth, and, according to legend, even had him blinded and forced to beg on the streets. He was subjected to the most profound injustice. Yet we have no record of him ever complaining. In his eyes, he was doing his job. He did it well. He did what was right. That was enough. We have so little control over the rewards for our work. People may not appreciate you. The market may not reward you. You may get unlucky. If you tie your happiness to these external things, you are setting yourself up for a life of misery. But if you can find satisfaction in the effort itself, in knowing you did your best, then you are invincible. The author points to the tragic story of John Kennedy Toole, whose masterpiece, A Confederacy of Dunces, was rejected by every publisher. The rejection so broke his heart that he took his own life. Years later, his mother got the book published, and it won the Pulitzer Prize. The book was the same. It was a masterpiece when he died, just as it was when it won the award. If only he could have seen that. The world's opinion is not the final verdict. Your own standard is. Sometimes, life doesn't just hand you a failure. It delivers a Fight Club moment, a moment where your entire world is demolished. A boss's brutal critique. The end of a relationship. The news that knocks the wind out of you. These moments are hell. But they are also moments of absolute clarity. The bullshit is stripped away. You are forced to look at the truth. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall. But it is in these broken places, as Hemingway wrote, that many of us become strong. The world can show you the truth, but it cannot force you to accept it. That choice is yours. And in that choice, you must know when to draw the line. When you find yourself in a hole, the first rule is to stop digging. John DeLorean couldn't do that. When his company failed, he didn't accept it. His ego couldn't handle it. He kept digging, all the way to a multi-million-dollar cocaine deal that ended in his arrest. He turned a business failure into a life catastrophe. Contrast that with Steve Jobs. When he was fired from Apple, a firing his own ego had caused, he was devastated. He sold all his stock and swore he'd never think of the place again. But then he did something else. He started a new company. And another. He learned from his mistakes. He had the courage to make a full stop, regroup, and start a new chapter. He didn't let one failure define his entire life. The only real failure is to abandon your principles. To navigate this, you must maintain your own scorecard. Society's scoreboard is fickle. It rewards luck. It rewards charlatans. Your inner scorecard is different. It measures you against your own potential. It asks, did I do my best? Did I adhere to my standards? The New England Patriots drafted Tom Brady in the 6th round. It was perhaps the greatest draft pick in history. But the front office was disappointed in themselves. Their scouting had been so wrong that this incredible talent almost slipped through their fingers. They saw it as a process failure. They held themselves to a higher standard than just winning. Because of that, they kept getting better. And finally, through all of this, through aspiration, success, and failure, there is one final transcendent piece of wisdom. Always love. The media magnate William Randolph Hearst was one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. When a young filmmaker named Orson Welles made a movie, Citizen Kane, that Hearst felt was about him, he launched an all-consuming campaign to destroy it. He spent a fortune, called in every favor, and used every dirty trick to crush this one little film. Why? Because his ego was slighted. And what was the result? His crusade is what cemented Citizen Kane's place in history and forever defined his own legacy as that of a petty, vindictive bully. Hate, the author tells us, accomplishes the opposite of what we hope. It's a cancer. It eats away at our vital center. It's a burden. Frederick Douglass, when asked to move to the baggage car of a train because of his race, was approached by a white supporter who apologized for how he had been degraded. Douglass's response was profound. "They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass," he said. "The soul that is within me no man can degrade. I am not the one that is being degraded on account of this treatment, but those who are inflicting it upon me." He didn't hate his enemies. He felt a sort of pity for them. This is the ultimate victory over the ego. To choose love, or at least forgiveness, over hate. To let go. Because everyone else moves on. It is only our own ego that keeps us trapped in the past, replaying old wounds, a prisoner of our own bitterness. And so the cycle continues. Aspiration leads to success. success creates new challenges. And inevitably, we will face failure. And failure, if we handle it right, leads to new aspirations. In every phase, ego is there, whispering in our ear. The battle is never over. It's like sweeping the floor. Just because you've done it once, doesn't mean it's clean forever. Every day, the dust comes back. Every day, we must sweep. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through Ego is the Enemy, it's hard not to feel a sense of profound clarity. This isn't a book about grand, complex theories. It's about a simple, fundamental truth that resonates deep in our bones. We all know this enemy. We've all heard its voice. It's what Martin Luther King Jr. called the civil war going on within all of our lives, the battle between our better selves and our baser instincts. What Ryan Holiday does so masterfully is give a name and a face to that internal opponent. By drawing on these timeless stories, from generals and presidents to rock stars and CEOs, he shows us that this struggle is not unique to us. It is the central struggle of the human condition, especially for those who dare to aim high. The message isn't to crush your ambition, it's to fuel it with something more powerful and sustainable than ego. It's about finding strength in humility, confidence in discipline, and wisdom in failure. In a world that screams for attention, that celebrates swagger and self-promotion, the path outlined in this book is a quiet rebellion. It's the path of substance over style, of character over credit. It's a harder path, no doubt. But it's the only one that leads to a destination worth reaching. So how can we begin to walk this path? Starting today, here are 3 simple practices inspired by the book. First, practice the canvas strategy. Sometime in the next 24 hours, identify one person in your life you look up to, a teacher, a boss, a mentor. Then, find one small, tangible thing you can do to make their job or life easier. Don't ask for permission. Don't announce it. Just do it, and expect nothing in return. Clear a small piece of the path for them. Feel what it's like to contribute without needing credit. Second, choose a live time over dead time. The next time you find yourself stuck and waiting, in a long line, in traffic, waiting for a response to an important email, notice the impulse to get frustrated or pull out your phone for a mindless scroll. That is ego demanding instant gratification. Instead, make a different choice. Pull out a book you've been meaning to read. Jot down some ideas in a notebook. Use that wasted moment to learn, to think, to grow. That is a lifetime. And third, start your own inner scorecard. At the end of today, before you go to sleep, take 2 minutes. Don't just list what you accomplished. Ask yourself 2 questions. Did I live up to my own standards of effort today? And, did I act with integrity and kindness? This isn't about judging yourself harshly. It's about shifting your definition of success from what the world gives you to what you give to the world. This book is a mirror. It forces us to look at ourselves honestly, perhaps for the first time. It asks us to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. The journey it outlines is not one of a single victory, but of a lifetime of practice. It's about the daily sweeping of the floor, the constant vigilance against an enemy that is clever, persistent, and deeply personal. But it is a battle worth fighting, because on the other side of that struggle lies the person you were meant to become. That was a look inside Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. We've explored the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real transformation happens when you let the book work on you directly. It's in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with something deep inside you. This conversation is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've discussed today has sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge, It's an experience that can genuinely change how you navigate your ambitions and your life. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue to learn and grow together.